All right, we're live. Welcome to another Penn State Turfgrass Happy Hour. I'm really excited about this particular week's topic because instead of just talking agronomics or just talking about things being done at Penn State, we kind of mixed it up this week and we decided to invite a bunch of students from a bunch of different universities to come and share their experiences and insight into how they find an internship, what they're looking for, and maybe for superintendents watching and sports turf managers, you can gain some insight in terms of how to fine tune your program to attract more students to your internships. So welcome everybody. I really appreciate all of you coming here today and tonight. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna jump right into it, but before we start, I wanna just go around who I see, and I'll call on you to just maybe introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your experiences so far and your plans for your career. So Stephen, you're in my top left. I'm going to start with you.
How's it going, everybody? My name is Stephen Page. I'm in the four-year program at Michigan State, and I graduate this spring. I did my internship over the summer. I worked full-time at Sabonic Golf Club and part-time at Shinnecock Hills Golf Club. And next spring after graduation, I'm heading out to Shinnecock Hills to be an assistant superintendent there.
Awesome. So you'll be working with one of my students, Aaron. He's also going out as an assistant out there. So next, Ryan Trudeau, you're next up on my view.
Hey guys, my name is Ryan Trudeau. I'm from Montreal, Quebec. I'm a first-year student in the two-year golf course turfgrass management program at Penn State. I will be doing my internship at Maidstone Country Club in New York, and my plans after graduation is to head down south to Augusta National.
Okay, great. Amy, you're up next.
My name is Amy Wilbur. I'm currently a master's student at Mississippi State University, but I did my undergrad at the four-year program at The Ohio State University. In 2017, I interned at Shoal Creek in Birmingham, Alabama. And then in the summer of 2018, I interned at Wimbledon, the tennis courts in London. I should be finishing my master's this spring, and then we'll be transitioning into a PhD program this summer.
You're going to stay there and get your PhD as well?
Yes.
Good for you. So how many photos do you have of you doing the Ohio, however it goes, at all the different places you go? Probably a bunch, right?
I'm not a big photo person, so I don't have too many, but.
Good. I still hear you though, the Ohio State. You gotta say that. All right, Jessica, you're up next.
All right, my name is Jessica Anders. I am a graduating senior at the University of Arkansas. I did 2 years at Northwest Arkansas Community College in Ag, Food, and Life, and then I transitioned to the university. My major is horticulture, landscape, and turf grass. And this May, I started an internship at Peninsula Golf and Racquet Club in Gulf Shores, Alabama. And I'm still currently here on the golf course, finishing my last class online. I'm hoping to find a way to incorporate horticulture and turf grass when I graduate and see where that takes me.
Yeah, that's awesome. You're probably one of many students that is taking advantage of having online classes to where you can continue to work, make some money, gain some experience, but still kind of finish up classes that you have. So good for you. Ryan, Giles, you're up.
Hi, my name is Ryan Giles. I am in the two-year program at the University of Maryland Institute of Applied Agriculture. And the past 2 summers, 2019 and 2020, I interned at Congressional Country Club in Bethesda, Maryland. And in February, I will be starting an assistant superintendent position there.
Awesome. So we'll jump right into it. Before I start, now that we're recording and have a few more people that joined us, for the participants that are in here listening, there's a chat box and there's also a Q&A box. If you have any questions for the students in this particular topic, just leave it there. I'll be monitoring it and we'll jump in and ask those questions. But to get started off, I'm always fascinated to figure out what it is that you were looking for and how you physically were finding your internships, right? So is it through your professors or some website? So I guess I'll start, maybe Jessica, I'll start with you just out of random. How did you go about finding any of your interns? Was it through, an individual? Was it networking or how was it?
Well, for starters, I really had never even taken a turfgrass class. I ended up taking Intro to Turfgrass Management with Dr. Richardson in the fall and really enjoyed it. And so I sort of just started looking for internships on my own. I didn't know about TurfNet at the time. I wish I did. It probably would have helped me out a lot. But I ended up just finding an old listing through North Carolina Extension for the internship that I took. But I spent a lot of time just kind of sifting through internships and sending out resumes and cover letters. So it was more so just something that I did on my own.
Good. So you brought up a point though. You brought up TurfNet. Raise your hand. How many of you use TurfNet to find positions? Right. So for better, for worse, GCSA has one, TurfNet has one. Theirs seems to be the best, right? It seems to be the one that's most up to date. Most people have their information on there. There's some functionality that I wish they could update to make it more sortable by things. But I think that's where a lot of people find their interns. Anybody have a different experience? I mean, even if it was through TurfNet, but through a connection or through some other way, or is everybody just kind of hunt and peck on their own?
Mine was just kind of researching courses, seeing what was available, and Dr. Rogers would give me the contact information. I could reach out and see if they were offering any positions.
Okay, so you use your faculty. I know Ryan Trudeau, and we have a whole class where we go through it. So he had kind of some of that experience. It wasn't one of my questions, but Jessica mentioned it. How many courses did you apply to? I'll start with Ryan Giles.
For me, I only actually applied to one. I ended up calling Pete at Congressional, and I think later on that afternoon, I actually ended up going over the course and just meeting and had a formal interview a little bit later, but I only applied there.
What about Jessica? You mentioned that you applied to a few. How many did you apply to?
I applied for, I would say around 10, and then I heard back from maybe 4.
Wow, that's a terrible message to superintendents that are looking. Always get back to people, especially if you ever want interns, like always get back to them. So yeah, Ryan, maybe you can tell a little bit about your process, Ryan Trudeau, and how you did it in class here.
So yeah, like you said, we had a class basically on internships, and each one of us applied to 2, knowing that we were going to accept one, and the other one just give us practice to decline it, but keep the option open if after graduation we want to do another internship, to keep that to not burn any bridges. And so I applied to 2, and I was very happy with the one I got.
Okay, good. So I'll jump in with a question that Eddie Harbaugh has from the question and answer. Does anybody, I think most people in here are golf, although Amy, you did an internship on sports fields. Does anybody ever use Sports Turf Managers Association's job board?
I've known of it and I checked it out, but I wasn't interested in those options. But I know it's available.
Yeah, so Eddie, maybe you can leave a comment too in terms of the benefits of the STMA job board. We don't have, I didn't look to see if any of our faculty were in here. I'd let them in as oh, McNitt's in here. Maybe I'll see if he wants to, I'll promote him to a panelist. He can chime in. So Dr. McNitt is obviously our sports turf guru, and he would know more about the opportunities, and he may not want to talk or be on camera, but I just put him under the bus here, so.
That's fine. I mean, STMA is a pretty good site, but of course it's only for sports turf. So most of the folks on here, it sounds like, are primarily interested in golf. So I can kind of understand why you didn't look there, but it's a pretty good site.
I got to imagine that there, aside from being catered towards, sports turf or golf turf, that, and I don't know if TurfNet has much in the way of sports turf on there. Or not. I don't know. Andy, I don't know if you know, does TurfNet do anything with sports turf?
They do. They have sports turf internships on there.
Yeah. So both good opportunities, I think, for people to look. So I have another question then. And it goes in line with Mark Daniels just left a question and said, what about sending flyers to the universities for people? Is it worth it? I guess my next question would be, when you're going and looking at the announcements, whether it's a hard copy or TurfNet or STMA or GCSA, what stands out to you as something that just draws your attention? Is there any one thing that you're like, you know what, that's really what I was looking for? And that could be salary, it could be responsibility. Anybody have any thoughts on what you might have looked for? Feel free to just unmute yourself.
For me, going out east, living in Michigan, having free housing was a big plus and a big draw for me when I was looking for my internships.
Raise your hand if you had free housing at wherever you interned. Yeah, so that's a big one. I think it's always a hang up for people and that don't have that option because you kind of lose out from some people. So housing's a big one. What else?
I was really interested in intern to, I guess you could say, superintendent ratio, how many interns would be there over the summer and what kind of one-on-one learning experiences you would gain from it. But housing was also another big thing for me, seeing as I wanted to go out of state. So.
From my perspective, I agree with Jessica. I was looking for something more local. So I think that plays into it too. If you're looking to travel or you're looking to, go down south comparatively from Maryland to get some warm season grass experience, or are you looking to stay local? And for me, I already had a lease on an apartment here, and housing was offered, but I didn't really need it since I was already paying money for a lease.
Yeah, so yeah, I lost my train of thought because I'm trying to read the questions and stuff and listen. Anybody else have anything? Because I see these advertisements and I could probably work with any superintendent and formulate an advertisement to actually woo any student, right? Like I see what the students look for, but there's a big difference between actually getting a student to commit, be interested, but actually fulfilling on that need. So actually, Ryan, I know where I was going to go. I was going to kind of shift that towards Amy. So Amy, you did an internship overseas at Wimbledon. So how important was that for you in terms of getting out of your comfort zone and going to a different area? What did you think about that experience?
Well, I had moved like over 1,000 miles for my first internship. So I've transplanted to a different city, different weather. So it was different, but I always had the desire to go overseas. And so it was definitely a lot of work. So like in TurfNet, like when I got internships, pretty much offers were made within 2 weeks, but it was a year-long process before I could go over, started with the visa and all the authorization processes. So there's a lot more work that goes into it, but I think the reward is much higher. But it's definitely set up differently. Like I found my own housing and everything, but I'd say it's worthwhile to put yourself out there. You're gonna learn so many different things, like regulations wise. Like in the United States, I was spraying every other day and I couldn't touch a single chemical in the UK because I didn't have a license and their spectrum of what they can use is so much smaller. So it exposes you to a lot of different things in turfgrass management, but also just interacting with people from all over the world made a really big difference that summer.
Yeah, I think so too. I think for all of you that, would take an internship away from home, I always tell the students, it takes away the distractions. Like you don't get upset when on Friday night, they're like, we need you to work this weekend, but you were supposed to go hang out with your friends because you don't have any friends aside from the people you work with when you're far away. So that can be a bit of a distraction. I'll follow up too with, did all of you had housing, right? All of you were provided housing. Let me ask you this, a hypothetical. If you weren't provided housing, but you really wanted to go to a club, what could that club, what do you think that club could do to make it a little bit easier on you, even if you were, had to find your own housing? Is there anything that maybe a club could do that doesn't have housing? Could they subsidize that housing for you? Could they help you find it? I mean, what do you think would maybe, like, you really want to go to this place like Amy did? Maybe Amy, you could talk about it. How was that? How was the difficult process for you to, how difficult of a process it was for you to find housing there?
I rented a room in like a 6-person house, and so it was a very different experience, and it was like a 5-minute walk from work. But one problem with doing 3-month internships is you can't get a 3-month lease a lot of places, and so that can be really hard. So if they can like partner you with someone else from the club that's also interning or can help you get into a lease, because renting a space for 3 months can be really hard. So that's one thing to consider. I know doing the 6-month internship, some guys can find easier housing, and then courses can give you, like, if you've never been to this city and you're just going in blind, they can tell you what neighborhoods are good or bad. Sometimes with the prices, you can kind of tell if a neighborhood's bad because it's really cheap, but if you have locals that help point you to the right directions of town, that can be really helpful.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. We had that situation this year where somebody went where they didn't have housing, or last summer, and they Airbnb'd it with somebody. They worked out a deal to Airbnb it. I think there's a lot more opportunities now. I think COVID throws a monkey wrench in a lot of these things, but in general, there's ways to work around it. I think that the facilities that have housing have a huge advantage, but I wouldn't distract the student from interviewing at a place that doesn't have housing and then negotiating, like, well, can you subsidize it, or can you at least help me find a place, right? Like, I think most undergraduates feel like it's a little daunting to all of a sudden pick up and go somewhere far and have to find a house. And Amy, in your case, for 3 months, that would be pretty tough. Any of you, somebody asked in here about a reminder, it's not always about sports turf and golf turf. Did anybody get into this from the beginning just by like maintaining lawns or doing anything in lawn care? Or was it just straight from going right into university and learning about it?
Mine was just straight from working on a golf course. That's how I got interested in it.
Same with me. I started working on a golf course and then came to university.
Yeah, I mean, I like to mow stripes in my lawn as a kid when I was younger, but I never thought I would do turf as a career. It wasn't something that I aspired to as a young person. But I do see a lot of students get their start that way, right? They started their own local lawn care company, and and it is a good viable option. And the person who asked that was Chris Brown from Teed & Brown, who owns a pretty large landscaping and lawn care company. So I run the golf turf program, and Andy does a lot of sports turf. And so we tend to focus on those things, but there's so many good job opportunities out there in the industry and in all facets of it. Another question somebody had, and you guys can comment on this. How important do you feel for you is it to go to a big club, either nationally ranked or really well-known, for an internship to build your resume? How much thought have you given to that? Maybe Steven, I'll talk to you since you were.
Yeah, I think it was definitely a really cool experience, and I think it would look good on a resume, but for me, it was also about finding a superintendent that I connected with and someone who wanted to teach me. So I think if you can find out an internship and learn a lot, then jobs are going to come along the way at big clubs.
Anybody else have any thoughts on that? I know you're all trying to build your resume in different aspects, but what does that look like for you? So,
I guess I was more concerned about just the experience that I would get and how much I could learn from that specific experience. So it was more about finding a superintendent that was willing to teach and grow with me than just the resume. I actually didn't have I'd never been on a golf course before my turfgrass internship. So I was starting from, zero. And so it was important to find a superintendent willing to walk me through that process.
So from that standpoint, at some point, all of you had to have your first experience on a golf course. And how many of you had experience in any aspect of turf or golf course prior to going to college? Okay, so 2 of you. So I'm going to exclude you out of this conversation for now. Jessica, you already talked about it a little bit, and Stephen and Amy, I'm going to pick on you too. Can you tell me how daunting that is from the first time you step on a golf course. You've never, worked on a course before, or you don't know really what's going on. What are you looking for from that perspective in terms of, what to get out of that time?
Yeah, so I've been a golfer for years. So I've been on the course, but the first day working was definitely scary, especially getting on a mower for the first time, thinking you're gonna mess something up. But I think the biggest part that helped me was having a crew and a superintendent that knew you were new, could tell you were nervous, and were there, willing to help, willing to teach you. I think that just made a world of difference to me. It just made me feel comfortable, and it was just much better.
Amy, how about you?
It was pretty daunting. It was also kind of confusing. I didn't grow up golfing. I grew up on a sod farm. So I was like purely just like, I care about the grass. And so like the first couple of days, it was confusing. Like they're like, oh, go water on 3T. And I was like, I don't know where the third hole is. And so it was like a little confusing to start with, but they were all really understanding and welcoming, and the assistants were super easy to talk to. And so they would answer every single question and kind of figured out our strengths and weaknesses coming in and really built on that for our experience.
Sorry, I was muted. What about the couple of you, Ryan and Ryan, that maybe had some experience prior to? I know Ryan Trudeau, you haven't done your official internship yet, but you've done some work. But Ryan Giles, what about you? You said you had experience prior to going to college.
Yeah, so initially out of high school, I actually went to the University of Delaware, and I was pursuing political science. And then I came back home for a while, started working at a local golf course, Needwood Golf Course in Montgomery County. And I had a great superintendent who kind of mentored me and showed me that you could pursue turf grass and, in college and make a career out of it. So in choosing my internship, I wanted to get a feel for what a larger private course was like compared to the municipal one I worked on for the previous 3 years.
Awesome. When you are, now that Ryan Trudeau, you've worked, but you haven't done an internship. Everybody else has done at least one internship. I think sometimes you're treated a little differently on an internship, right? They're expecting bigger things from you. It's not just like go weed whack and mow. If it's a good internship anyway, it's like we need to train you and teach you. Is there anything that stood out to you as being kind of really important that you learned that maybe you didn't really think about when you went into your internship? Does anybody have anything like, I never thought about this aspect of it, but that really is what helped me learn a lot on this internship? It's kind of a wide open question, but I guess my feeling in this is you take a few classes, you learn some basic science, you're interested, maybe you do your first internship, you learn something, and then you take more classes, then you learn more. Is there anything that you didn't expect to learner that was important that you ultimately thought this was actually something really good that I didn't think about?
So at Sabonic, we installed sub-air control units on 2 of our greens. So I learned how to use a trencher, basically a bunch of big construction equipment that I never thought I would have to use besides a tractor. So I thought that was pretty cool, and it was something I never thought I would actually need to know how to do or use.
How much of your internship is focused on agronomics and just doing stuff versus taking a step back and looking at like people management and how people are treated and how they interact? Do you guys think about that on your internship? Jessica, I'll pick on you. Well, Steve, you unmuted. I'll go to you first.
I was gonna say mine was probably 90% agronomic.
And I think over time, as you do more of those, then it becomes more management and understanding, in people. But Jessica, what about you? You kind of got thrown to the wolves when you got there. So at the beginning, everything's probably like new to you. But now that you've been there for a little while, how are you adjusting, or what are you trying to learn now that was different from when you first started?
Well, the learning curve was definitely huge. Never being on equipment or knowing how to use some of the basic equipment that we use every day. That was a big, huge learning curve for me that took some time. Also, just learning that it's okay to mess up, and there's no need to feel like you need to do things perfect the first time. Learning how to be patient with myself was a big part of it. And for me, going into this, horticulture was my background. I didn't know really anything about the turf grass side, and we do focus a lot on the agronomy side. And so I've gotten to learn a lot of things that I probably would have never been exposed to. So last summer, one of our courses went through a renovation, and I wish I would have gotten to see that. But there's just been a whole lot of different things to learn from, and yeah.
Sorry, my wife's pushing a bunch of buttons, so I was trying to mute myself on our stove. I'm going to shift topics a little bit, and Larry, I'll get to your question in a minute. How important were things like the ability to volunteer at tournaments, or is the place hosting a tournament, or those types of things in terms of selecting your internship? Did anybody look at that or consider that, or was that a consideration? It kind of goes along the lines of, does it have to be a big name course? But it doesn't always have to be that way. I mean, sometimes people can send you to volunteer at a tournament. Did anybody look at an internship from that standpoint?
I didn't see working as a tournament as like a must. It was more just if the golf course was holding a tournament, it was just like a plus that I'd be able to get tournament experience.
And the other Ryan, I know you were going there for the construction purpose, but obviously they've got a lot of big events coming up. So
Yeah, I kind of had the same opinion as the other Ryan, was that, if I got some tournament experience, it was an added bonus. So it wasn't like it wasn't on my target for landing an internship that it needed to have volunteer opportunity.
good. Anybody else?
I didn't look at it, but we did have a tour event at a neighboring course, and so we volunteered, and it was a good experience. And I was there for the year prior to the U.S. Women's Open, and so it's pretty interesting to be in the build up to a tournament and see how that goes, because that can be a very important facet. But I definitely wasn't expecting to go to a big name course. It just happened to work out that way. So sometimes the big name courses, you want to make sure you're going to get experience. You don't want to rig bunkers at a big name. Sometimes it's better to go somewhere smaller where you're going to get a variety of experience and actually build your resume.
Yeah, and it spurred a couple questions in my mind for all of you. One of them would be, what would be the influence of the number of interns that a place would take on in terms of your decision-making factor? And obviously everybody's different. So some of you like a lot, some of you like a little, but can you walk me through, for those of you that took that into consideration, what it meant to have, a bunch of people there working, or if maybe you're the only intern? Anybody take that into consideration?
It was definitely a huge part of it for me. I definitely wanted to have a small intern ratio. I knew that if I went to a larger course, I would be around, multiple other interns, and I wanted it to feel more like a learning experience rather than just a summer job where I could grow my resume and learn how to do multiple different things and actually learn to master them or feel comfortable doing a wide variety of things.
Anybody else have an opinion on it, or was that not a consideration?
I didn't consider it, but I enjoyed having multiple other interns. I actually interned with one guy from South Africa, one guy from Australia my first year, and it was cool having the international mix into the thing. And I think you can learn a lot from your peers and other interns. While you might think learning opportunities might be limited because there are more interns, I think the camaraderie is a big aspect of getting through some days interning.
Steven, I think you were going to say something.
I was gonna say that when I was at Sabonic, I was the only intern there, and I did enjoy that. I felt like I got a lot more one-on-one time with the assistants and the superintendent. And at Shinnecock, there were 2 other interns, and I liked that as well because we could bounce ideas off each other, and it gave me someone who's going through the same stuff I was that I could talk to.
So I always get curious as to how a superintendent or turf manager can positively promote, whether they have one intern or whether they have many interns, right? So, you know, one intern might be great for somebody like Jessica, who wanted a lot more one-on-one, whereas Ryan Giles, surrounded by a dozen interns, and I have my philosophy, but how does the superintendent or sports turf manager spin that in an advertisement? Like if you're going to tell them to, you know, Ryan for somebody that is interning with a lot of students, like how do they promote that? How do they make that sound like a positive experience and not a daunting or scary experience?
From a promotion standpoint, I would probably focus on the exposure to other viewpoints, you know, exposure to different school systems. You can kind of bounce ideas like Stephen was saying off your peers, and you can get just exposed to different ways of life, how different people manage grass in my perspective. But I wasn't searching for a, you know, an internship with multiple interns. It just so happened that it worked out like that. And, you know, if I was by myself, then so be it. I would have no problem with it either way.
Jessica, what about you? I don't know what the advertisement looked like for the course you're at now. I mean, did they promote that you were going to get one-on-one and a few interns, or what?
What really set it off for me was when I had a conversation with Jamie Davis over the phone and really got to talking about what the internship would look like. And we talked about interns that he had had in the past and kind of what both of our expectations were. And that's when I really got the idea that it was going to be a big learning and growing experience for me. And we were really going to tailor to my background and my interests as well. So yeah, it was basically the conversation that I had with him.
Awesome. Let's shift focus a little bit. So there's another question that came in here. Tim Gravert said, by the time the students are doing their internships, would you say that a majority have their mind made up on the route they're looking to take, or would the opportunity to do an internship at a facility that has a split internship between golf and sports make it stand out? Anybody have any thoughts on that?
I'll go ahead. I went into college thinking I wanted to manage sports turf. That was like the whole plan. But with the golf opportunities, just the number and the housing and the pay is just so much better in golf, pretty much. And all of the opportunities I saw, I was like, the first summer, I'll just test out golf. And so I think an opportunity that gives you exposure to both is like a good opportunity. And you'll learn stuff in both that will benefit each other. So I've seen the split internship postings after I finish up my internships, and I think they would be really cool to do.
Yeah, my mind is pretty set on the golf route. That doesn't mean that it won't change down the line, but you know, coming into school, my mind is set on going down, working on golf courses.
I think the hardest part, because I look at those split internships too, and actually we're going to have somebody from the Baltimore Orioles who had a posting with one of those split internships. I think the hardest thing that I see, especially for those of you doing a 3-month internship, is it takes 3 months just to kind of get acclimated to the one property you're at, right? And by the end, you're like comfortable finally. And then all of a sudden they'd be like bouncing you over to another property, which could be good or it could be, you know, a bit of a struggle. I think if it's a longer internship, it might be more feasible. But usually the students doing a short internship have multiple opportunities to do an internship. So maybe like Amy, you know, you do a golf internship and then the next year you do a sports turf internship. I do like the idea of giving students the opportunity to get exposure to both though. Andy, I don't know if you're there, but do you ever hear of anybody doing these kind of mixed internships? He probably left and just has his thing sitting up there. So, okay, so you talk about being focused on one, either golf or sports or maybe split. Let's take a step back. You've looked at the internship application, you've talked to people, and now you have to get set up to prepare and do an interview. Just by show of hands, how many of you, did any of you interview in person? A couple of you did. The rest of you, I assume it was phone or Zoom. How do you prepare for that? How do you prepare for your interviews? And is it a daunting task? Did you have a list of questions? Did you put on a professional attire, or did you just say, like, I'm going to hang out on Zoom? For who interviewed in person? Amy and Ryan? Ryan, what about you? How did that go? What was that experience like?
Well, so my in-person interview was in 2019, pre-COVID time. Since I did a second internship there, I didn't have to interview again. Yeah, I dressed in a suit and tie. I didn't do any real formal preparation. I just kind of was in a good headspace, got a good night of sleep the night before, and kind of went into it like that.
Amy, you're the other in-person interview. I assume you did an in-person interview at Wilmington.
I applied to 2 golf courses in Eastern Pennsylvania, so like 3 hours from home. So when I went home for winter break one day, I went out and
maybe, I don't know.
interned at 2 of those places. And so I dressed as professionally, but as warmly as possible in December, and tried to research the clubs as much as possible, kind of getting their background, their history, and then just being really comfortable with my resume and my cover letter. So I'd be prepared to ask any questions or answer any questions they had. I'm terrible usually at coming up with questions to ask them, and that's a weakness in all my interviews. So that's definitely something that students should be prepared, is to have a list of questions to take into the interview with them.
Ryan, Steven, or Jessica, any of you have a question that stood out that you had to get the answer to, that you were like, I really am curious about this, or that helps you make a decision as to whether that was going to be a good fit for you?
My question I asked them was if I was going to be able to have any days off, because I know I'm there to work, and I was happy to work long hours, long days, but I wanted him also to know that I may need a day or two just to recharge.
Yeah,
Mine was,
go ahead, Ryan.
Mine was definitely a different interview. Mr. Genovesi just started off by saying, like, we're not really worried about what you know and don't know. We could train you on everything. And he just wanted to see if I could, like, shoot the shit with him, basically. So we were basically just talking about the Bruins and the Canadians at one point. So it was definitely a different path than a regular interview.
Jessica, what about you? What was your interview like?
Mine was actually, it started with 2 separate phone calls. And then after that, since it was 12 hours away from home, I had a Zoom interview with the superintendent and then the assistant superintendents as well. And I felt prepared for that. I did have a few questions that I asked, and I felt really comfortable with my resume and cover letter. And I had also done a lot of research on the course and the surrounding area as well. So, one of the biggest things we talked about in my interview was my horticulture background and how that would pertain to turf grass and what I wanted to get out of the internship. So it was a very good interview experience for sure.
I can't think of Ryan Trudeau. We don't really come up with specific questions, but I think all of you have kind of touched on it in terms of, I think it's important to have a background of the course you're applying to, right? Like, you should do homework ahead, and you should show that you're putting the effort in. And then, as Ryan Trudeau said, like, sometimes these interviews are more about personality fits, right? Like, they may not care that you have a ton of experience. They just want to be able to know that you're going to be a good fit within their group. So I think that that's funny. Now, one of the things that came up in Steven's answers was time off, right? And so that's like a touchy subject, like asking, am I going to play free golf? Am I going to have time off? Am I going to be in management meetings? Like there's questions that you want to get the answer to, but that it's tough to ask. So 12 years ago, when I took over the 2-year program, I would say 90% of the people were like, I want to be a superintendent and host the US Open. And there's a huge shift in your generation to where work-life balance has become much more openly talked about. So can you all, maybe I kind of want to hear from everybody. Can you all kind of go around and talk about how you address those difficult things? Do you just suck it up and say, like, I'm going to work my butt off this season, I'm not going to ask for it? Or are you like Steven, where it's very important to say, look, I need a recharge? And how do you just feel in general about, you know, when you get into the industry and start working full time, you know, what is your philosophy in terms of what's better for your mental well-being? I'm going to go in order of how I see you, and that would be Ryan Trudeau. I'm going to just kind of start with you.
Yeah, so for me, it wasn't really something that I was worried about. I even told him during my interview that I don't mind working 70-hour weeks. I'm, you know, halfway through the internship, it could be rough, but this is, you know, an educational aspect of it. So that wasn't really something I was worried about.
How do you think you'll address that? You know, you can't work 80 hours a week every week for the rest of your life, right? At some point you got to, you know, find an adjustment to it. But, you know, I'll move on to the next person. We'll come back to you. But Amy, what about you?
I was guaranteed every other weekend off, so that going into it, that was a nice understanding. The weekdays, that varied and we worked long, hard days, but knowing that we had that time off and our bosses took time off, like they alternated weekends. And so it was something that was very well understood. And then switching to Wimbledon, they only work 8 to 5 every day and weekends are optional. So it was a complete shift. And so they just treat it like a regular office job basically. And so I like that perspective, and I definitely see the trend towards a healthier work-life balance. And I would desire that for whatever job I have in the future. It's just wanting a family and probably kids in the future, and knowing that I want to have time at home and I'm not dedicated to the job or married to the job. Like there's other commitments in life.
Good. Jessica, what about you?
It wasn't, for me, it wasn't a question that I asked, and it wasn't necessarily a concern. I was just happy to get the experience. And I knew going into it that the days would be very long and hard, and that I would be lucky if I had, you know, a weekend off or a day off here and there. At my course, it's been basically one weekend day, whether it's Saturday or Sunday, guaranteed off weekly. And then the other weekend day is a very short shift. It's from 6 a.m. to usually about 10 a.m. or 10:30. So, but for me, I was just happy to have the experience and looking forward to working really hard. So.
All right, Ryan, Giles, what about you?
For me, it was the same situation as Amy, where the managers would do alternate every other weekend off, and the same thing happened with the interns. So you would know you were guaranteed at least, you know, a weekend off every 2 weeks. So that was nice to have in the back of your mind. The hours didn't concern me much. A lot of what we do can be dependent on the weather in the mid-Atlantic in the summertime, whether it's, you know, hand watering late into the afternoon or whatnot, but the hours weren't really a concern.
Steven?
Yeah, what's funny is I asked that question to Garrett from Sabonic, and then I worked 70 hours a week, 7 days a week, all summer with 1 day off. So I think it's something I just wanted to see what he would say about time off, just so I kind of get a feel for him and for the environment that I was going to be working in.
Okay,
And
so
then
having worked with and having had interns with Garrett, what did he say when you asked that question?
he was kind of like, well, we work a lot here. We work a lot of hours. Like, he kind of didn't quite answer my question fully. And so that's when I kind of knew. I was like, all right, that's all right.
I think the biggest thing is for people to be honest with each other, right? Like if you go into a place that's not going to allow you to do that, then say it, because you don't want someone that's there. So my philosophy is there's no bad internship, it's just a bad fit, right? So like if you want to work 80 hours a week because you're putting yourself through school, then that's a fine thing. If you don't want to do that, then don't go to a place that's going to work you that hard, and vice versa. So so a few other questions that I had, and Larry, we'll get to your question too. A couple of things that I always see students want to gain, and obviously it depends on their level, is spray experience. That always seems to be a big one, right? They want to learn how to spray pesticides, and management experience. And so I'm curious with your internships, how important those two aspects were, and did you get those, or have you gotten that, that experience, and maybe what those look like? Amy, you mentioned already that you sprayed every other day or something at your first course. So talk a little bit about spraying, and the question from Larry was, does anyone try to get their pesticide license prior to their internship or graduation? And do you have an opinion on whether you think that would make it easier in terms of gaining your first choice at an internship? I think most people will take anybody that wants to intern, so I don't think a license is necessary, but I'm just curious your thoughts. Amy, thoughts on spraying and management?
So I think as long as you're spraying under a certified applicator, they don't really care. Yeah, my first day on the course, I was hosing for an assistant spray hawking, so I was kind of thrown into it. But managing bentgrass greens in Alabama, disease pressure is very high. And so we were out spraying like micronutrients and fungicides every other day. And then, so I'm really good at math, and they found that out very quickly. And so I was kind of trusted with that kind of stuff. And so in the afternoons, I would spot spray around the course most afternoons. So I'd say it's a very important thing it's good experience to have, but sometimes they take advantage of it and you kind of want to do some other stuff. But once I got in control of actually spray hawking myself, and like getting paired with someone else to host for me, that kind of puts you in a position above them of kind of telling someone what to do and how to help you. And when you're working with someone who's been there for a while, it kind of puts this weird like power shift dynamic of, I've been here for 2 months, but you're going to do what I say. And so that was hard for me to get over. And I think we talked about this in a previous happy hour, like months ago, being a female over top of, or like managing guys, and them trying to do stuff for me as a chivalrous thing kind of put me in an awkward position. But management, I think, is important, and seeing how they make decisions and just bringing interns into that discussion is something that's going to make you better. I have a minor in business, and so going through some management classes, I think it's very helpful to have some management experience, because ultimately most of your job is managing people in the future.
So you kind of answered that question in two forms. Basically, you got the spray experience, but it ultimately led you to be in a management position because of it, and then the difficulties. I'm going to come back to the women in turf issue in a minute. We're going to continue with this because I know that that's a topic that both of you can add to. Anybody else have experience in terms of either getting involved in spraying or even being involved in the management and what that looks like? Ryan or Steven?
I spent a lot of time this summer spot spraying. I haven't gotten on a rig yet, but that's a goal. I also really want to get my pesticide license. Hopefully after I graduate, I'll have time to really commit to studying for the exams. But I have enjoyed spot spraying this summer. Management wasn't really something that I did, but I got to learn a lot from watching the assistants and the superintendent, just watching them manage and watching them deal with difficult situations taught me a lot, and will hopefully make me more comfortable when it's my turn to make those decisions.
How about Ryan or Ryan, you're unmuted. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I got experience spraying and both with some management experience. For me, at Congressional, we were using these TopCon GPS sprayers on our sprayers. So that was a cool experience to get acquainted with GPS spraying technology and how we use it and how it can be beneficial to you as a sprayer, as an operator. And then in terms of management this summer, I was able to lead a crew of guys doing a bunch of tree planting. We planted over 60 maple, beech, and oak trees as part of a reforestation commitment with the local county. So that was a great experience as well.
Yeah, Montgomery County is a unique place, so it's really tough. Stephen, what about you? Did you have any management? I guess like some of the things I look at is like, do they allow you to sit in morning meetings, right, with the assistants and the superintendents? Do they involve you in that, even if you're a fly on the wall? But do they put you out with everybody in the break room, the seasonal employees, or they involve you? How was it with you, Stephen?
Yeah, so I was in there with the two assistants and Garrett every morning before we went out and talked to the crew. So I got to hear that kind of banter, what the day was going to look like. So I got to do that every morning, which is nice.
How many of you carried radios? Raise a hand. 1, 2, 3. So that's something that I always tell superintendents to try to encourage students to get involved with, because you can listen and learn so much about what's going on. And sometimes they're like, you're an intern, you don't need a radio. But it's not about being able to communicate, but being able to like hear what's going on and listen to everything. And so I think Ryan this summer, Ryan Trudeau, I think at Maidstone, you'll have a radio and they'll involve you in all of those things. So somebody asked a question, and we only have a few minutes left, and I want to get to this. Would you enjoy an 11 on, 3 off schedule, meaning a Friday off every other weekend, so where you had basically a long weekend? It's most courses have the ground teams can complete the task needed on a Friday, or half the ground staff can complete it on a Friday, and so therefore you'd have some time off. And so, one, I would say, is that something that sounds positive to you? And two, how many of you, which goes in line with this, how many of you, because you all went away to your internships, how many of you took advantage of things to do from a personal standpoint in the area, the city you were in, London, Washington, D.C., wherever it was that you were located? How many of you took advantage of that? Anybody want to chime in?
So, yeah, so I was in Southampton, both at Shinnecock and at Savonic. Usually getting off work at 6:30 or so, I was pretty beat for the day, so I'd head in. But it was nice getting to know the interns and assistants from Shinnecock, since they're about my age. So I did go out and hang out with them a couple days, but I didn't really go see the area or sightsee anything while I was there.
Did you visit at least National and Shinnecock when you were there?
Oh yeah, I was there at Shinnecock. I could see National through the trees, but I never got a chance to go over there.
Yeah, it's like the clubhouse that looks down on Nationals. Such a silly match between members there. What about others? Amy, I'll pick on you because you were in London. I mean, did you get to experience a lot? You also had a shortened work week because I know they don't work 80 hours a week over there.
Yeah, I stayed in London, but I explored a bunch of the parks and museums. I could have gotten flights. Like, I had coworkers that would fly down to like Europe and explore for the weekend. I was always afraid I'd get stuck somewhere and not be able to get back in time for Monday morning, but there was definitely a lot to explore, and I took advantage of it because you weren't so burnt out. But working on a golf course, I took my off weekends pretty easy, just trying to catch up on sleep. I also had a friend 2 hours away, so I'd like drive up and visit that family quite a bit. So that was one of the reasons for choosing that area, was there's kind of a getaway for the off time.
What about Jessica? I don't remember exactly where you're located. It's in Alabama, right?
I mean, No, Gulf Shores, Alabama. And my internship has been, heavy during the pandemic, but luckily for me, I fish a lot and I just love to spend all my time outside. So basically every weekend, if I had the chance, I was out fishing or out on the beach. So I definitely feel like I got to see, or I've continued to see everything that I want to. So it's been a really great experience.
Awesome. And Ryan, Giles?
Yeah, I actually do the same thing as Jessica. On my weekends off, I would usually just go to the local lake near me out in Gaithersburg, Maryland, and fish for bass and take it easy. In terms of the 3-day, weekend, I could see that being attractive. I think it's very relative. At least for me, I was looking to see what the work-life balance was, working at a top 100 course in general, and I wanted to understand what it was going to be like if I was going to pursue a career in turf, what the hours were going to be like. And I really wouldn't want that change just because it's an internship. I feel like
Yeah, I understand it. I think that most of my students go far away, and I always encourage them to explore the city. I never used to do that. I used to be like, you're there to work. That's it. You should be there to work. But, there's value in trying to like take in some culture, or even like visiting other golf courses, right? You can always network and have that opportunity, even if you don't go far. So like Ryan Trudeau, who's going to be on, out in East Hampton, there's not much to do out there, right? It's like a pretty expensive place and there's not a ton to do, but there are a lot of really good golf courses that you could go and visit. And one of his classmates will be, Stephen, you said you're going to Shinnecock, right? One of his classmates will be with you at Shinnecock. And so there's always that networking and opportunity. So we are just about out of time. And I really appreciate everybody coming. But the one last kind of question, because I think Amy brought it up, is women in turf, right? So right now, since George Floyd's death and then all the subsequent things that have gone on, and not just women in turf, but underrepresented minorities, this is a very white industry, right? White male industry. So everybody's trying to be better, I think, and trying to, expand it for more people to get involved. And I think that women are a group that really we've not capitalized on in terms of what they can bring to the industry. So Amy, I'll start with you since you brought it up, and then Jessica, I'll ask your opinion. Things like you mentioned, like people trying to do jobs for you and chivalrous, like I'm sure that's grating and annoying. How do you deal with it all? Like, how do you manage in those situations?
I am pretty strong-willed, and I'm like, I can do this. Don't treat me differently. Like, I can do anything the boys can do. If I want help, I'll ask for help. And so just trying to stand up for yourself is hard, but I think it's worth it. I also have something to mention. We started with housing, and so that is something that I also encountered when interning. I toured a place. They're like, this is where our interns stay. And I sat down with the superintendent. And they were like, yeah, I don't know how I'd feel about you like living with the guys. Like, I have daughters, and I'm like, well, like, I don't think it's that big of a deal. So like, that's something that housing may be offered, but if they don't feel comfortable hosting everyone in their housing, that is a barrier to hosting interns.
Yeah, and it's very discriminatory, and I've run into that in the past. I don't have many females in the program, but I've had a few. And if you have one and you're trying to find an internship and superintendents say like, sorry, I can't have them because they're going to be in a room that's shared and I only have men interns, I kind of put that group on a list and say like, you have to get better at being able to handle these situations. And I try not to like really push other interns to go to those places, even if it's just guys. Like I'm like, we should be, creating a better environment, which also means that superintendents who are struggling to find interns could probably use that as an advantage and be like, we have housing that can accommodate, females and individuals. Jessica, what about you and your experience?
So my experience has been similar. Just making sure that you can get your voice heard and um, knowing when to kind of put a barrier there and know that you're just as capable as the males at doing any job. And in a way, just kind of letting it encourage you. Being encouraged to be able to do what the males can do just as well and be confident in doing it also. So it's been definitely being in such a male dominated field when you're already intimidated has been a little bit scary and challenging, but it's also been very encouraging as well. So I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Good answers from both of you and insight, and good for the three gentlemen in here to kind of be aware of these things and recognize that these are real issues. And I kind of laugh because Amy, you said they realized early that you were good at math. And I'm like, well, you just beat 90% of the people out because most people suck at math. And so having that as a plus, it's like, wow, there's really a strength, right? So I think all of you need to find out what your niche is and what your strengths are. So I think we'll wrap up there. I do want to give everybody one last shot at answering a question, and we'll go around and maybe by the time we get to the last person, the answer will be the same. But Ryan Trudeau, we'll start with you. So you all have had all these experiences, you shared them here. Advice for young people looking for interns, if you could give them a piece of advice, what would it be? And so Ryan Trudeau, we'll start with you.
Like you mean somebody who wants an internship or a superintendent looking to get interns?
I'm thinking more along the lines of the student, right? If you've gone through it, you've gone through this process, but somebody that hasn't, what do they, what could help them?
For me, it was just if I'm a fit or not. Like originally I thought I was going to go out west, and I was like 95% sure I was going to go out west. And then after my interview with Maidstone, I just realized that it was a perfect fit for me. So that's what I looked for.
Okay, Amy?
I'd say have goals going into your internship and make your supervisors aware of what you want to do and how to achieve those goals so they can help you. And if they shift and evolve, let them know. And it's a constantly evolving process. And you want to come out of your internship with knowledge. You're going to go back to school and people are going to ask, what did you learn? And so you want to have tasks and ideas to take back to school with you.
Good. Jessica?
I'd say that my biggest advice is to not be terrified of failure and to know that it's going to be a huge learning experience and you're going to gain so much from it. And I liked what Amy said about having distinct goals and making them clear and sharing them with the team that you're working for and making sure that you're staying on track. And then also just taking every learning experience that you can, whether that be even if it's not necessarily on the course, if you have a networking opportunity or if you have just any opportunity, any new chance to learn something, take it all in for sure.
Okay, Ryan?
I would say pick an internship that you think is going to challenge you the most and don't be afraid of failure. I think, there are plenty of times where, you're experiencing new things out on your internship. You're doing new roles, you're doing new tasks, and there's a lot of pressure on you, or, whether it be external or internal pressure. I think you should be open to new challenges and open to failing to learn.
Great. Stephen?
Yeah, kind of going back to what Ryan said earlier, I think, talk to multiple courses, talk to multiple superintendents. And I think finding a spot where you fit the best is so important. Just be comfortable with the superintendent and just feel comfortable with yourself.
Awesome. I think for part one series of the internships, what I really like about this and you guys being candid and sharing your thoughts is we'll put this up on YouTube. And I think that for, the next few years, people can look back at this and watch this and say, wow, these are things I didn't think of, or some things that maybe have changed, or maybe some questions I should have asked. And so I think it's really great that you all were willing to join us and share your information. So we'll wrap it up there. Next week, December 10th, we have the superintendent's version, where I think we'll be joined probably with around 7 superintendents and sports turf managers who will share kind of the internships and what they look for from their perspective. So there's another PSU happy hour. Thanks for joining us. I appreciate it, and we'll see you next week. Record a second one. Okay. What's the biggest thing you screwed up on your internship? Did anybody have like a major blunder? I've heard diesel in gas tanks. I've heard scalping greens. I've heard all kinds of things. Anybody have a good story that they can share?
I had a backpack sprayer in the back of a gator, and I hit a bump, and I got to this bunker, and I looked, and it was tipped over, and it was dripping out of the corner of the gator. So I just like floored it up to the native area where it was safe into the rough, and put it back on. And I kind of looked back to where by the bunker was. It was on 18 at Savonic, and I was like, all right, we'll see how that looks in a couple days. And sure enough, there was a couple, just a little trail of yellow dots from the bunker from the chemicals.
Yeah, I've seen that a lot, especially where somebody like turns the sprayer off, but it still drips. It drips out. Jessica, you were gonna say.
Yes, so this was during aerification week, which, going into this internship, not knowing what aerification was, it was an intense process to begin with. And we were out aerifying collars on our lakes course. And I had done the first few holes really well. And so they kind of just turned me over to do it on my own while still watching me. And I went over to the green. And instead of putting the Procore on the collar and aerifying it, I aerified a tiny pass on the cleanup lap in the green. So that was really embarrassing. But luckily it was caught before I went too far. I probably only aerified about 2 feet on the green. But the greens had already been aerified. So yeah, it wasn't too good. But that was probably my worst.
Did you ever monitor to see how that area healed up differently than the other areas?
Well, we actually went out and hand top dressed that area right away after I had aerified that little part. But it healed back really well. We watered it right after I learned how to top dress it by hand, and yeah, it looks good now. So
Anybody else have a good story they're willing to share?
Yeah, on my last day, I was supposed to be spraying 7 green and went to 8 because 7 was short and I was leapfrogging. And so I realized it and then tried to go up and tried to use this like really narrow bridge that we usually don't use our sprayers on. And I hit the corner, busted the tire and bent the rim. And so we were stuck for like an hour and a half and we couldn't move. And so I was like, it's my last day, so going out with a bang.
You're like, peace out. Good luck fixing that unit. The mechanic hates you now. Ryan or Steven, do you guys have anything?
Yeah, I didn't have any big big mess ups, but my first year we did have a huge storm that we got about 5.5 inches of rain in an hour and a half, and our whole irrigation main holding pond flooded. Was completely flooded some green sites. And as part of the cleanup that day, I was looking through the bunkers that still had a ton of water in them. And I saw a bunch of fish in there. And as the water level went down, it became a fish rescue mission where me and a couple other interns had shovels, and we were getting the bass and the crappie back into the lake trying to save them. So that was a fun day.
It's good. It's a good success story. I assume you saved some lives that day. Anybody else? It'll happen. If you haven't killed grass, you will kill grass, right? It happens to everybody. I think the biggest thing is just, learning from those mistakes and still being willing to put yourself out there to try new things. I think that's always a good piece of advice. So, all right, we're going to peace out for the second time, and I'll stop this recording. But